Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to our Los Angeles multifamily meetup. We are a group of investors, realtors, people wanting to invest, everything that has to do with multifamily and investing in Los Angeles. This is your group. If you would like to join our group officially and attend future sessions, lamultifamilymeetup.com is our domain name, and you can click there and officially join the meetup group and be the first to know about any of our topics we have coming up. I am Anthony Volin. I'm the owner and broker of The Collective. We're a residential and commercial real estate company serving the greater LA area. We have a super great team, and Will Tiao here is co-hosting with me. He's the director of our commercial division, and we'll get to Will in just a moment. But I just wanted to welcome everybody officially today. And, you know, at The Collective, our mission, it's written outside on our door. It's creating paths to wealth through real estate. So everything that we do is geared around creating different paths to wealth through real estate. And one of the paths is through education. You have to understand and learn and be on top of what's happening in this ever-changing environment through local laws, through state laws. And, you know, especially today, as we talk about SB 9 and 10, education is a huge part. It's a huge value that we have at The Collective. So thank you guys for joining us. You're always welcome to join us. You know, all of our education is open up to, like I said, to realtors, to investors, to anyone. We just want to make sure that we get the information out there as part of fulfilling what our mission is at The Collective. I know we do have a lot of realtors that are on the call too, which is awesome because it's our responsibility, right, to make sure that we're getting the message out to our clients of what's happening and what's changing, and some of the exciting things that are happening, such as SB 9 and 10, of messages that we can get out to help them build wealth. You know, I always let everyone know that we're not home finders anymore. Anybody can find a home online, but we really have to make sure that our focus is being the people, the go-to resource for making sure that we're protecting and helping to grow our clients' wealth. So it's just the core of who we are and how our profession has changed. If you are a realtor, we're always looking for realtors at The Collective. We have an amazing business model. Once you sell $3 million in real estate, you go to a 96% commission split. So it's pretty great to be able to have that opportunity to have a 96% split for a lot of the year. You sell one multifamily building at 3 million and boom, you're at 96% for the rest of the year. One class as well that I wanted to just pitch, and I'll put inside of the chat that's coming up on April 26th. It's a little bit of a continuation of what we're going to talk about today. So we all know that inventory is super low throughout the state, throughout the country, especially in Los Angeles, that we need more inventory. And I feel as an owner of a brokerage in Los Angeles, it's my responsibility. And as being president of the Greater LA Real Estate Association, it's definitely my responsibility to help just try to solve any of the problems that we have as realtors and we have as investors and buyers. And the inventory shortage is a huge thing. So on April 26th at 4 o'clock, we're going to have a panel discussion on creative ways to increase inventory. So some of the things we're going to discuss, we'll have Sheri, who's our guest speaker today, back reviewing SB 9 and 10. We're going to be talking about ADUs and how that can help increase inventory. Will Tiao will be talking about TICs, tenancy in common properties, and how converting multifamily rental units into homeownership opportunities, and what that process looks like and how that could help to bring wealth back to our communities. And that's going to be interesting. We have a senior housing specialist that will be part of it. One of the big issues that we're seeing right now is a lot of the baby boomers are not downsizing. They're staying in their homes. They don't know where to go. And there's amazing communities all around that offer so many things where you don't have to be sick to go to. A lot of times people think, oh, I don't want to go to an old person's home, but it's not about that, right? There's a lot of amenities and, pools and activities and all kinds of fun things that are going on in these communities that I think that we need to do a better job educating people about as well to help to free up some inventory. So I'll put the link in the chat. Would love to see you guys on April 26th at 4 o'clock. Next, I will be introducing Will Tiao, the director of our commercial division, to bring us to our first part of our program that we always have with multifamily before we get to our speaker. Will, take it over.
Thanks, Anthony. Good to see everybody. It's good to see a full room today. A lot of familiar faces and some new ones as well. For those of you for who this is the first time, you are at the Los Angeles Multifamily Real Estate Networking Group. As Anthony said, my name is Will Tiao. I am the director of the commercial division here at the Collective Realty. I specialize in the purchase and sale of multifamily properties. I also have a property management company called Tiao Properties. We manage over 200 units throughout the greater Los Angeles area. And we ourselves are investors and landlords as well. So we know very much exactly what our clients go through. And we are often tasked with taking them through, hand by hand through the process. I always spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about what's going on specifically in the multifamily market. Not unlike the single family market, there is definitely still a lack of inventory here in Los Angeles and greater Southern California area. That said, I am seeing particularly smaller deals. And when I say smaller deals, I'm talking like 2 to 6 unit, 2 to 7 unit properties, excuse me, are sitting a little bit longer on the market. I'm seeing longer days on market. I'm also seeing things trade at slightly higher cap rates. I am in escrow currently on a 5-unit listing in Silver Lake. We are going to trade at a 5 cap. So it is, and for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with, say, cap rates or gross rent multipliers, GRMs, we do on our collective YouTube page. I always do at the beginning of the year a kind of real estate investing 101 where I talk about how to define a cap rate, how to define GRM, those various things, the various ways in which you can analyze a deal. So a 5 cap is pretty strong. We haven't seen 5 caps here in LA for a while. And so the fact that we're starting to see stuff trade at a 5 cap says to me that the market is definitely slightly shifting. I think the biggest issue for most people that we get calls for primarily, and this is primarily on the management side, is that people are still confused about all the regulations that are coming down from the city of LA, from the county of LA, and from the state, particularly with regards to eviction moratoriums that are still outstanding. There is, for those of you who do have clients or are yourself small landlords or even big landlords, March 31st is a key date because that's the last day that people can apply for housing assistance through Housing is Key. So if you have tenants who are behind, you want to make sure that they get their application in by March 31st. We've been in our portfolio, pretty, working a lot with our tenants in terms of any of those that have been behind. We have less than 2% that are behind. I do have one tenant who has not paid since March 2020. And he has applied, he got, so if I was to take that entire total from that point, it's almost 100K. He has gotten a significant chunk of that back from the government. Our client, the landlord, the owner of the property, he still owes about 25K left. So, and I understand that he's applied for that as well. So that's definitely something if you have any questions on any of this stuff, feel free to reach out. Of course, we'll do our best to answer any questions that we can. Sometimes we have to refer stuff to a landlord tenant lawyer, which we've had plenty of in this seminar. We've had many landlord tenant lawyers come talk about the eviction moratoriums and various things. And once again, you can see a lot of those things on the YouTube page. So like I said, rents are still very strong. And if you do have vacant units, we are seeing year-to-year increases for sure. I would say at least in the 5 to 6% range from where they were last year. That said, we get a lot of people asking us like, can I raise my rent if I'm in if I own a rent controlled property in the city of Los Angeles? And as of right now, that answer is no. You cannot raise the rent on a rent controlled property. However, you can if your property is covered by AB 1482 or is not rent controlled at all. Once again, something, that's an individual property by property question. We also always reserve a little bit of time for wants and needs and deals. So we have a deal coming up in Silver Lake. It is a triplex, currently a triplex, on the corner, very near the corner of Hyperion and Griffith Park Boulevard, which is, for those of you who are familiar with Silver Lake, that's a very, that's a commercial corner over there. So there's a Gelson's there. There's a lot of different restaurants and bars that are all walking distance. The street that it's on, Griffith Park Boulevard, this property, is commercially zoned. So even though it's currently a triplex, you could, a savvy investor could potentially build up to 10 units on this property. And the owner did a feasibility study to look into that, and we do have that feasibility study. I do not have this on the market yet. This is why we do this, is to give people an opportunity to look into it before we hit the market. So we are planning to list this for $995. So just right under $1 million. To be honest with you, I haven't even calculated the cap rate in the GRM. I know it's not great, frankly. There are long-term tenants there. And many of you know, with rent control, you're going to have, I think the total is about $4,500 a month for the 3 units. So we are putting together all the flyer information as we speak. If any of you are interested in a deal like that, feel free to reach out to me. I will put my contact information in the chat below later. Now, in the meantime, I want to open up the floor, and feel free to use the raise hand. I don't know how to do that, but there's I think most of you have been on Zoom now for 2 years, so you all know how to do the raise hand button. If you have one, if you have a deal or you have a question, feel free. If you have a want, if you yourself are looking for something, if you're a client looking for something, this is your chance to kind of put it out there. It could be residential, it could be multifamily, whatever, commercial, whatever you're looking for. There are times where deals have been done in this room as we speak. So please let us know. Is there anyone out there who has a deal or a want or a need that they'd like to talk about? Zach, go ahead.
Oh, hey, Will. I guess a clarification. Sorry if I didn't hear. Can you go over again the property that you just mentioned, the one on right here in Silver Lake? You said it's commercially zoned and it's 3 units currently. And can you tell again about what you talked about, the capacity to increase to 10 units? What was that? Did I hear that wrong?
No, you heard that correctly. So it's zoned C2, and by the lot size, that would allow you to build up to 10 units on the property.
So what is there now besides those 3 units?
That's
So-
it, just the 3 units.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
And the 10 units, you would have to build vertically in order to
Right.
get at least that many units, not
Okay.
side by side, unless tiny units.
Yeah. And then just real quickly taking a step back on the macro questions, you talked about the properties, the property activities, you know, the 5%, the 5 cap rate, as well as the property sitting a little longer. Any additional thoughts on now that interest rates have actually finally physically raised a 1/4 point with, I guess, I didn't know, now they're saying there's going to be 6 more increases this year. I know it's speculative and no one knows exactly, but any additional thoughts on that now that that has actually happened?
Well, we know from a macroeconomic standpoint, right, that like as interest rates go up, that decreases buyers' purchasing power. And, you know, if you were to follow a textbook, you would assume that prices would start to fall accordingly. Now, as we all know, the real world doesn't always follow a textbook. The last time we had interest rate rises, which was in 2019, pre-pandemic, I remember very clearly, you know, there was, as soon as the interest rate started going up, there was a lull in activity. Buyers were kind of waiting for prices to fall, and sellers just refused to budge. And so there was almost like very little activity for like 5 or 6 months, and then all of a sudden, people just realized, well, they're just not going to budge. We got to keep transacting. So, you know, that time at the end of 19, early 20, before the pandemic, was some of the busiest times that those of us saw in the multifamily industry. I sold a 16-unit in Echo Park for over 600K above asking, with over 30 offers during that period, right as the pandemic was hitting. And so obviously we're going to have to wait and see a little bit. Obviously, everybody's kind of curious to see what's going to happen with actual interest rates. As of right now, you know, there isn't always a perfect correlation, right, between the Fed funds rate and the actual interest rates that are being charged. So, you know, interest rates have been kind of going back and forth a little bit. I have a client who is making an offer as we speak on a 5-plex, and his financing's in the mid-3s, you know, which is still really good, you know, for commercial financing, right? I mean, those of us who have been around long enough, my first condo I bought at 8%, and that was considered low, right?
Right.
So yeah, but definitely if you're thinking about buying, you want to lock in a low interest rate, you probably want to do that sooner rather than later. That's for sure.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I thought I saw something in the chat. From Pamela, looking for an off-market single family, minimum 3-bedroom, 1,800 square feet, under 1 million in the valley in some specific area. Anyone have anything? Very good question, Pamela. I think a lot of people are asking that question right now. Last year I sold a 1,400 square foot with an illegal ADU, you know, for 1.25 million with 15 offers, you know, so that, you know, that shows you how tough that is in that market. Is there anyone else before we get to our speaker? I know we're all really excited. I personally am very excited about this, about our talk today. And I don't want to hold it up, but I always want to give people an opportunity if there are any other wants, needs, or deals. All right, then. Let's get to our speaker. Very, very excited to introduce Sheri Bonstelle, Jeffer Mangles Butler and Mitchell. She is a partner there and head of the Government Land Use Environment and Energy Group, and has been practicing in the real estate development legal field for more than 20 years. She is also a member of the Global Hospitality Group and the Renewable Energy Climate Change Group. She manages all aspects of the entitlement process, including representing clients before local and state agencies, commissions, and councils. She coordinates project teams to evaluate environmental impacts under CEQA and to conduct community outreach, and represents clients in a variety of land use and CEQA litigation cases in state court. Her projects range from single-family homes to a 1 million square foot hotel and condominium development in downtown Los Angeles to a coastal commission approval of a 74 lot boat slip into South Bay. She is also a licensed architect in New York, where she practiced before entering the legal profession. We also, she didn't mention this, we share an alma mater. We both went to Columbia, New York. So she got her bachelor's and her master's there. I only got my master's. And so without further ado, we're really lucky to have her. She is very smart, really knows her stuff. And this is an area that all of us in the real estate world need to learn about and will need to continue to learn about as it progresses. So Sheri, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation for you. I also have a PDF version of this presentation. So if anybody wants the PDF version after this meeting, I'm happy to send it to you or have Will send it to you. Once I share my screen, I can't look at the chat anymore. So I don't know, I could just go through the presentation and we can do questions at the end. But if you have a burning question you need to ask me, you can feel free to do it during the presentation. So let's see. Did that work?
Looks
yes,
good.
It did.
Okay, great. All right, so I was asked to present on SB 9 and SB 10, but I'm also going to start off with SB 8 because SB 8 gives me a pit in my stomach. We get a lot of calls from developers and property owners that don't know about S3 330 and SB 8 that updates it, and they get stuck with properties and they can't develop what they thought they could on the property. So this is me in a picture of me from 10 years ago. And this is a project that we just got approved in West Hollywood on the corner of Fairfax and Fountain. And it's a co-living project with 18 units. And this project probably would not have been approved, but for SB 330 and SB 8. Okay, so SB 8 is a cleanup bill that was adopted basically to extend SB 330 and a streamlined process for housing applications at the local level. So this started with the Housing Accountability Act that was enacted in 1982, and it tried to curtail local agencies from denying housing projects and basically the state was going to force local jurisdictions to approve housing projects if they met certain qualifications. And it's been amended a number of times, but it really didn't have any teeth in it. And so it wasn't, we couldn't litigate under it. It was really hard to enforce. And so in 2019, the state legislature adopted SB 330, which is known as the Housing Crisis Act. And it was, it enacted a certain number of rules that would be in place until 2025. And here are some of the key ones. It limited the number of hearings that you could have on your development project to 5 hearings. So, before this, we would have, 10, 15 hearings on some of our projects because planning commissions wouldn't want to make a decision, or they would just keep continuing it, or they would, want us to redesign our project and come back. And by limiting the number of hearings to 5, it made commissions and councils have to make a decision in the room. The next, it created vesting rights for later adopted changes in local ordinances. So if you followed the requirements that each of the cities have for filing SB 330 projects, then you're vested as of the date that your application is deemed complete. A lot of times we put track maps on our projects to have the same effect, but now SB 330 does this. And it means that as you're going through the process, if a city decides that they don't like part of your project, they can't just adopt an ordinance to get around it. They actually have to process it. It requires cities and counties only to apply objective standards. And this is important, especially if you have design review commissions and everyone thinks that, they can limit your project by requiring you to redesign it based on aesthetics, and that's no longer the case. It limits cities and counties for imposing housing caps and development moratoria. And then it also requires that developers who demolish existing housing provide replacement housing with relocation benefits. And this is the key that I want to talk about today. So SB 8 was adopted. It's effective January 1 of this year, and it extended SB 330 to 2030, which means if you file an application in December of 2029, you will have vesting rights until 2034, and you can go through the entitlement process. It specifically identifies that the 5 hearing requirement includes appeals. So before it didn't include appeals, and the appeals hearings would just, could extend your project entitlement time significantly. And the most important thing that SB 8 does that everyone should be aware of is that it expands the housing development project definition to include ministerial and discretionary approvals. So it means that all of the rules under SB 330 apply even if you're just pulling a building permit. If you want to do a by right 10-unit building in Silver Lake and it's ministerial and you're just pulling a building permit, you have to comply with all of these requirements. It clarifies that cities can't downzone, but that includes cities can't adopt limits on height, density, floor area, or open space that would effectively downzone the property. So they can't say, oh, we're not downzoning you, but you can only have a 3-story building. Well, they can't adopt that rule if it's going to limit the amount of units on the property. It adds tenants protections, which include, if you have a building that has rent stabilized units in there, all the tenants in the building have a right to return to your new project, even if you're demolishing their entire building. They have a right of first refusal on a comparable unit. They have a right to remain in their building until 6 months before construction. So you can't just evict them and then go through the process. They'll be living in their project while you go through your entitlements or through your building permitting. And then you have to provide them relocation benefits. So the most important thing is that a project must include at least as many residential dwelling units as the greatest number of dwelling units that existed on the project site in the last 5 years. So that means if you are buying a duplex and you want to tear it down and build a single family home for yourself, you can't do that. You have to provide 2 units on the property. You have to have at least the same number of units that existed within the last 5 years. And then you must replace all protected units on site. So protected units are units that had a affordable covenant, units that were rent stabilized. So anything in Los Angeles that's a rent stabilized unit, units that were not rent stabilized, but just happen to have very low income housing households living there in the past 5 years. And then any unit that was withdrawn from Ellis Act in the past 10 years. So that means if you're buying a vacant lot, there's no building on that lot, no one's lived there for years, you need to do due diligence and see if 9 years ago the tenants were evicted under the Ellis Act and the building was demolished. Because if that happened and you had a 10-unit building, you have to replace those 10 units in your new project on the site. So land use due diligence is really, really important now with SB 8. It used to be that you could demolish a building and then just go in for a buy right project because SB 330 did not apply to buy right projects. Now SB 8 clarifies that they do apply to buy right projects. So you can't get around these replacement requirements. And the only exception is if you have a single family house and you demolish it and you replace it with a single family house. Then you don't have restrictions. And that's the only example. And we have some clients that buy multiple lots and tie them together. If you buy 2 lots and they each have a single family home on them and you tie them together and demolish those 2 single family homes, you have to have 2 units on your in your project moving forward. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to go through SB 9. SB 9 is the Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency, the Home Act, that has to do with either automatically permitting a 2-unit develop on the property or allowing an urban lot split. So the 2-unit development is only allowed for units that are in a single family zone, and the cities are each adopting their own SB9 procedures. I know that City of West Hollywood has adopted theirs. I haven't really thoroughly looked through it, but I'm familiar with Los Angeles's, and it lists all of the specific zones that qualify as a single family zone. So it's a number of A zones and a number of, RR1 zones, but no multifamily zones. And then an urban lot split is permitted under certain conditions without requiring CEQA review, because it's permitted as a ministerial project. In this instance, if you split the lot, they have to be relatively equal parcels. So you can't have, one lot that's a split that's 90% to 10%. Let's see. Okay, so there are numerous restrictions of where you can do this and limitations on it. So both the 2 units and the urban lot splits are only permitted in urban areas. They're only permitted in single family zones. They are not permitted in very high fire severity zones. So, anything north of Los Feliz in Silver Lake and Los Feliz, all the area around Griffith Park, say, are all very high severity zones. And you can't do it there unless you can mitigate your fire hazard, which can be really expensive. It's not permitted in historic districts. It's not permitted for historic buildings. When you split the lot, each lot has to be at least 1,200 square feet, which means that you have to have at least a 2,400 square foot lot in order to do it. And if you do it, you're allowed to have an 800 square foot minimum unit as your SB9 unit. A lot of cities are adopting ordinances that have a maximum 800 square foot unit as well, which means that all of these second units are going to be exactly 800 square feet. The cities are only allowed to require 1 parking space for the unit. And if the property is within a half mile of transit or 1 block from a car share, then you're not required to have any parking for the unit. There's limitations on demolitions of existing homes and certain percentages of the homes that can be demolished or added to. And you're not allowed to demolish any units that are low income, rent controlled, or tenant occupied within the last 3 years if you use SB9. And it can't be applied to properties that were withdrawn under Ellis in the past 15 years. So if you have the lot split, an owner has to remain on the property and sign a covenant that they will remain there for 3 years. And you can only split. Yeah.
There's one question from Stephanie.
Okay.
Hi, thanks again for the information. It's really helpful that we've kind of dissected it and pulled it and providing it. So thank you very much. A question about the very high fire severity zone and less can mitigate. Just wondering if you know what that is or have anything, any knowledge about what that entails in order to meet that mitigation. Just curious.
So I don't specifically know. I had a discussion with an architect about this that they basically said essentially you have to show that you're not increasing the fire hazard, and so it would just cause. I think that the requirements are going to be access for fire trucks and making sure that your second building is fireproof, and that I think a lot of it has to do with the fire access, which is often a problem if you're in these fire areas, a lot of which in LA are in the hills. But I don't.
Yeah, that sounds like a gray area of what is worse, but good to know and find out. Okay, thank you.
Sure. So under SB9, you can only split your lot once. Using the SB9 ministerial process, you can always, apply for a subdivision map act request that is discretionary. If you use SB9, it's only allowable for a 30-day rental minimum. So an actual renter, there's no short-term rentals allowed, but you are still allowed to have registered home sharing in the actual house. For a 2-unit development, and these are the requirements that the city of LA came out with. If you have a 2-unit development, it permits 2 new units on the property, or if it's vacant, or one new unit if you already have an existing unit, and it doesn't not allow adding ADUs. No, for the two unit development, it's 2 new units or adding 1 unit, but it excludes ADUs and junior ADUs. So if you already have ADUs on the property, or if you want to add ADUs later, you can still do it in the 2 unit development. If you're doing the urban lot split, you can have 2 units on each lot maximum, but no ADUs or junior ADUs. So in the urban lot split, you get a maximum of 4 units. In the 2 unit development, you also get a maximum of 4 units using your ADUs and junior ADUs. And then there are other exclusions under SB 35, which is it can't be an earthquake zone unless you can mitigate it again, a hazardous waste area, farmland area, wildlife habitat, or a flood zone. And in the coastal zone, they're allowed to require coastal development permits, which then would either be approved by the city or coastal commission, depending on where it's located. So additional restrictions are that the cities have to impose objective zoning standards, and they can't adopt standards that would preclude construction of 2 units that are at least 800 square feet. So they can't, impose setback standards or height standards or any kind of standards that would keep you from building these 2 units. For existing structures, you only have to maintain the existing setback, and you are allowed to put a second unit that's the same setback. But a local government can require a setback of up to 4 feet from the side and rear lot lines. The local government can only deny this project if there's a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or the physical environment. So otherwise, it's essentially a ministerial process, and the city or county can't deny it. So they can't, the city or county can't impose regulations that require dedications of rights of way or offsite constructions, and can't impose any additional owner occupancy standards beyond the urban lot split requirement. So they can't require in a 2 unit development that the owner have to remain on site. And also, if the existing house or structure is legal non-conforming, they can't require that you can become conforming in order to use SB 9. So here's examples of some different options. The first 3 are the 2 unit development option. So if, for instance, you had a junior ADU already attached to your house, you could still build an SB 9 unit, and the SB 9 unit could have its own ADU. If you already have an ADU, freestanding ADU on the property, then you can still build an SB 9 unit, and the SB 9 unit can have its own ADU. You can also build an SB 9 unit on your property and then have 2 additional ADUs, one for your original house and then one for the SB 9 unit. But if you do a lot split, then you're not, and you can't have more than 2 units on each property. So you can have 2 SB 9 units on the new property, and then on your property, you can have an ADU or another SB 9 unit. Okay, and then the final is SB 10, and SB 10 allows cities to, what?
So I think there was one more question for SB 9 before we get to that one. Christopher, Stanley, do you want to ask it? Okay.
I'm muted. I was muted because I'm in the office. Yeah, I'm just curious. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just curious about tenants in common. I'm working on a lot that has 2 single-family houses on a single-family lot. It's in South Hollywood. It seems like a logical lot split, but I know that rent control is a mitigating factor with this. But if 2 owners live on the property, they purchased it as tenants in common, nobody was evicted, would they potentially be able to split it after 3 years?
So is it currently rented?
Well, currently, one is vacant and renovated and for sale. The other one is not vacant yet, but it will be when we're doing a buyout.
And there are two single.
This is a
family-
hypothetical, though. It's more of a
Oh, okay,
hypothetical
okay.
for the future.
So-
I mean, I know that this, I'm just trying to understand what the options are. There are some really small lot houses in the area. This happens to be a 6,300 square foot lot on a corner with two frontages, each house fronting a different street. So with parking, so it makes a perfect sense to split it maybe, but since it has fallen under rent control for a long time, I'm not sure it would be an option in the future.
So your question is, can you buy the property, move into one of the units, I guess rent the other one out, or have another owner live in it?
No, that's no, my question. Sorry, let me rephrase. So my question is a single family lot that's been under rent control a long time, two houses on a lot, they're separate houses. Can you, if you have two owners, one lives in each house, they purchased the property as tenants in common when they bought it, when they bought in, can they split that lot? Forget no tenants. There won't be any tenants.
Okay.
The tenants are the owners.
So technically you can't split lots of rent stabilized units.
Ever.
So you would have
Okay.
to, and you can't. Right. So the question is, I mean, this is meant for single family lots with single family homes and not for to increase the number of units, not for multifamily properties.
Right.
And so I don't believe that, I believe if it's rent stabilized, in theory, you could Ellis the units, right? But then you're stuck with that Ellis restriction that you can't use SB9
Yeah, you said you can't use it if there's
if
an
you've
Ellis
Ellis
for
in the
15
past 15
years, right?
Yeah.
So
So
that's,
I don't think there's an, unless this was, yeah, I don't see an option of buying something now and Ellising it or
okay.
buying a multifamily.
Okay, I was just curious. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems like a logical one to split up. I realize it's not adding new housing, but it's already built. But it is two houses on a lot, and it would be affordable housing for a lot of people.
Right.
So
I mean, the reason
would
you want
be
to do
adding-
SB9, yeah. The reason you want
it
to do
would be adding
SB9 is because it,
affordable housing for sale.
right. I mean, the good thing about SB9
I mean, we
is-
always add it for rent, but we never seem to add affordable housing that's for sale. That's the thing that gets me. You know, this whole, everybody wants to own the American dream, but we never seem to build affordable housing. It's only affordable rentals. Just an,
yeah, I mean, that's a separate question that we can talk about too, how to make affordable housing that's actually for sale. So SB9 is important because it's ministerial and the city is required to process it and is required to approve it. You can always go in and do a subdivision map back request to subdivide a lot as long as your minimum lot sizes are met based on your zone. The good thing about SB9 is that it reduces the minimum lot size to 1,200, and a lot of single family areas have larger minimum lot sizes. But some of this, if you don't qualify because there's affordable housing or multifamily housing on a site, you can still often use a discretionary project to get through and have the same result. Right. So
One more question from David.
Yeah.
sure.
Hey Sheri, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Hey, question for you. I have a house that I bought in 2011 that's zoned R3 in the NoHo Art District. And I guess zoning R3, you could do underground parking, 6 units on the lot. I think 6 or 7 units, depending on size. I built an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And then the single family home is existing. I have renters in it. Did I screw myself to if I would have sold it to a developer to build 7 units on it? Building the ADU in the back. Did did I make a bad decision by building that unit in the back? Does that make sense?
So I don't know. So it's a single family home and you built an ADU.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
built ADU, but it's zoned R3, which is underground parking, 7 units you could build on it.
And so your question is, now you're going to have to do replacement, right?
If I want to sell it, can the developer build 7 units on it still?
Yeah, they could. They'd have to demolish the existing units.
Mhm.
They'd have to pay relocation for your tenant. They'd have to determine if your tenant is a protected tenant. And if they are, then they'd have to replace that unit in their new development.
Okay.
Normally when developers are building now, they're either doing TOCs if they're near transit or density bonus. And so if you have, 1 unit that you have to replace on site, they're going to make it one of their density bonus units.
Got it. Cool. I just wanted to make sure, like, if that was a bad decision to build an accessory dwelling unit in the back for, like, just to be able to sell it. I was just wondering if they could still make that happen for them.
Yeah, I think they can still make it happen if the lot's big enough that they can actually, accommodate.
Yeah.
If they need to do a replacement unit, they could accommodate it in the development.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is if you, are building, if somebody builds a second unit under SB 9, and years later, someone wants to come in and put a single family house back, then they no longer have that option because you always have to replace at least the number of units that are on the property. So that's more an issue.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so the final one is SB 10. This is it's basically just it's a bill that allows cities and counties to automatically adopt a 10-unit zoning for any residential zone, including single family zones. And it basically doesn't create one automatically, but it authorizes cities to do this without going through the CEQA process, either for their approval of their ordinance or for the applicant that applies for this. So if, for instance, the city of LA, for some reason, adopted this saying, automatically, all single family zones, you can build 10 units, they're allowed to do that. And then any owner would be able to build a 10-unit property, 10-unit structure on their building without CEQA review. I don't think that the large cities are going to adopt this, but I think a number of smaller cities that want to make it easier to for their property owners to increase the number of housing, and especially those that are really far away from meeting the RHNA requirements, they could adopt this, and then automatically there'll be a lot of larger, more affordable projects built in their cities. So we haven't seen any city yet take this up and try to adopt the zoning yet, but we expect it sometime during this year that some of the smaller cities might do that. And this is the end. So this is what I do all day, is literally just try and get housing constructed under the opposition of neighbors and other groups that use CEQA as a weapon and try to stop the housing development. So, hopefully these bills make it easier for the local cities and counties to get more housing constructed, because they won't be stuck up in this political process. And let's see. Yeah, and that's it. So does anybody have any other questions?
Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a little bit in line with what the question that was just asked. I think it's really, I guess, SB 8, but what specifically limited that number of units? Again, like what made it like, oh no, it was there was a single family and a single family, and they put a lot together, you know, hoping for something more based on the zoning or something. Yeah, can you tell me again what is that limited that to those, you know, historic units? No count.
So I don't. So is your question, what is the limit,
situation under which, I guess you mentioned for SB 8 that the difficulty was you had a client or people buy properties and then they think they're going to do something. They think they're going to add units or whatever. And you mentioned one example where there were 2 lots next to each other, each with a single family. They combine them, or they you know, combine the lots, right? And then they could only still build 2, right? Is that kind of what you alluded to, even though possibly the actual zoning or square footage or density would have allowed more? Can you explain that? Maybe I'm misunderstanding it.
So the under SB 330, you have to replace all of the units on site.
Sure.
You know, so if you have a 10-unit property and you can't tear it down and build, you know, an 8-unit condominium, you have to have at least the same number of residents.
Minimum, not
right. And,
yeah.
And in this particular instance, we had a client that bought 2 separate lots that each had a single family house on them. And he wanted to combine them to tear down both of these small houses, tie the lots, and then build one larger house. And he thought he was
larger. The one. Okay. He couldn't go down. He had to do at least 2.
Yeah. So he had to do at least 2.
But he could have, if it were something else, he could have done 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it allowed you to. It wasn't that it limited it to 2. It was that you had to do it in this case at least 2. Got it. Okay. Right. I was hearing.
And this is it's more of an issue for people who are want to build larger homes, you know, in the hills and think that they can add up smaller lots to do that, and that's no longer an option. You have to you can't you know, combine 3 lots and put your larger
you can't reduce
luxury house on
housing count. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Let's see. So someone asked if you can use SB 9 to subdivide or increase the number of units. What is the first step? Okay, so all the cities are putting out implementation memos of how to implement SB 9. I have the memos for SB 8 and SB 9 for the city of LA, which we can send to you. I believe City of West Hollywood, they just adopted their SB 9 ordinance, and I believe that they're creating a memo to run through how you do it. And because it's ministerial, typically your architect should be able to just, you know, run through the process themselves. In the city of LA, you just file with the building department, with LADBS, if you want to add a second unit on your property. If you're doing the lot
Sheri,
split,
you might want to define, for some of the people may not be familiar with the term ministerial, so you might want to define what that is.
So ministerial action means that the city has no discretion to deny your project as long as you meet certain standards. And typically a building permit is a ministerial action. You know, you file your plans with the city. As long as you meet all of the building permitting requirements, they sign off on them and they can't say no. And it doesn't require CEQA review, which is environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. A discretionary action means that the city can deny it if they make findings to deny your project. And you do have to do environmental review under CEQA. And that could be, you know, an exemption, or it could be anything up to an environmental impact report, depending on how large your project is and what kind of impacts you have. So for SB 9, if you are just doing a 2-unit development in the city of Los Angeles, you just go to the building department, you file your application, you notify them that it's an SB 9 project, and you just go through regular permitting. As long as you meet all the requirements, they'll issue you a building permit. For the lot split, because it's essentially requires an act under the Subdivision Map Act, even though it's still ministerial, not discretionary, you also have to get review from planning. But they have forms and there's a process. And typically, unless there are some specific issues that require legal analysis, the architects can just file and process these.
Thank you, Sheri. I can also answer Ara's question. So I believe, Sheri, you sent us the paperwork for what you're talking about regarding SB 9 and SB 10 in an email. So we have everybody's emails on here. We can forward that information to everybody who's on this call. I remember we had a conversation, Sheri, last fall when these were just proposals, they hadn't quite passed yet. And you were like, if this passes, we should just buy every single family lot out there and start building so that we can start building these things.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that?
I do. And I think there are a lot of, we have a lot of clients that are always looking for, the new thing and the new way to invest in property. And this is one of them. Buying a single family house on a decent sized lot without even subdividing. You just go in, you can build a second unit, you can build a junior ADU and an ADU on the property. You can end up with a 4-unit property without, all ministerially.
Yeah, it's actually revolutionary in my opinion. Like, I mean, it's really like, to change single family so that you can build up to 4 units on it is, for California anyways, is totally revolutionary. Rich Flegg, you said that you had a question.
Yeah, that was kind of my question. I was just going to say, isn't this just a game changer? I mean, isn't this gonna just change everything? I mean, it's going to change property values. I mean, it'll probably bring, I mean, can I buy a lot on Sunset and Brentwood and build 4 $20 million houses? Because I can build an ADU that's as big as a house, as big as a normal house. So, I mean, it's kind of nuts.
Right. I mean, you need to make sure that the lot complies with all the SB 9 requirements, and you saw that list of all the requirements that you have to meet. So I think this would apply really well to larger lots in the valley that are flat, where you could literally actually build all of this. The ones that are up in the hills are usually in these fire areas or earthquake areas or habitat areas, or historic areas. I have a feeling a lot of neighborhoods are going to start trying to get designated as historic to avoid this.
Right. And I mean, yeah. So I mean, how does it affect a lot value? If you have a 10,000 square foot lot, suddenly my lot has to be worth a lot more, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Your lot's worth a lot more. But also, I mean, your neighbors are going to be putting 4 units on their property too. And so you're going to end up in essentially a multifamily neighborhood.
That's okay. We should talk about that because I'm not convinced that obviously everybody's going to want to do this who lives in a single family, right? Like I have thought about it. We own a single family, and I don't really want to have to have neighbors or whatever, and so not everybody is going to want to do that to their single family lot, so it's not going to be like everybody's going to do this no matter what, right? So, but I think for in certain cases, for certain people, it does make sense, for sure.
Yeah.
And
One question, Sheri. I mean, and again, like to Will's point and what Rich is saying, I hear even from realtors and people saying, oh, it's going to destroy our neighborhoods and there's so much change that's going to be happening. And again, just please keep in mind the reason why this is happening is we have a huge housing crisis, an affordability crisis. And unless we build a substantial amount of units, it's going to be so unaffordable for anybody to come in and have that opportunity to live here, to be able to rent, to be able to own and have that opportunity to build wealth. It's needed. There's not a lot of options. And this is definitely one that's going to help. It's not going to change every neighborhood. My question was though, regarding the earthquake zone, right? So as realtors, we see a natural hazard zone disclosure map, and it'll have liquefaction zone and fault line zone. So what is an earthquake zone? Because I mean, LA is all earthquake zone, right? But maybe not.
Right. So I I don't know how the city of LA is going to define it and allow it or not allow it. When you go on to Zemus in the city of LA, it'll show you how far you are from an earthquake, an actual fault line. It'll tell you, you know, and if you're within, I forget how much it's basically if you're almost right on the line of where they've mapped the earthquake fault, then you're considered in the earthquake zone. So I don't know if the city is, and for instance, in the city of West Hollywood, the earthquake fault lines run, you know, right across Sunset, and we know this because we've developed a number of the hotel properties, and we know exactly where that line is, where the fault line is, and the buildings literally just, you know, have an arch over the ground and a lot of structural support so that they can withstand an earthquake. So we are aware exactly where those properties are, but I am not sure how if the cities are literally just going to deny the projects there. If you can it's the same question as with fire hazard. If you can mitigate the impact of the earthquake, then you're allowed to build there. So maybe it's a matter of identifying standards, such as being set back a certain amount from the earthquake fault line if you know exactly where it is, or maybe it's really just doing appropriate structural design to make sure that the buildings are safe.
And it's earthquake fault, not liquefaction.
Yes, it's earthquake fault.
I believe Sean has a question. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. So going back to we need housing, the primary use of this SB9, the splitting of the big lots, these are going to be rentals. No, can you sell each one of these separately then once you split it, or how does that work?
So if you split the lot, then you have two separate lots, and the two separate lots can be sold separately. But
and then you can have 2 units on each one of those 2 lots.
Correct.
Okay.
But the law doesn't have it so that they're on separate air lots and could be sold separately. I think the idea is that these would be rental properties. So you
right. So it's not adding. It's adding rental units, not necessarily home buying opportunities.
But it doesn't state that it has to be a rental unit.
Well, if you're dividing the lot, there's 2 APNs and there's 2 owners. So there's 2. You're increasing one opportunity for a homeowner for sure. So it doubles the amount of home ownership opportunities in a lot, but it also increases rental opportunities. So
now, and then one more follow-up to that. Realistically speaking, you've got these lots in the valley where it's all flat, 8,000-12,000 square foot lots. A lot of these are larger homes to begin with, and they have pools. I mean, basically, you'd have to deconstruct what you have there to kind of create if you're going to maximize it to 4 units. At the end of the day, you just have to do the math, I guess, to see if that makes sense, right? I mean, you can't just start adding things randomly.
That's what I was saying, is that not every homeowner is going to want to, turn their property into a multifamily property. It works for some properties in certain areas and whatnot, but I have a hard time believing that exactly some of these people, that's our situation. We have a pool, whatnot. I wouldn't want to take that out, so I think that calculation is going to go into a lot of homeowners.
And the minimum lot size is interesting because I'm part of the San Fernando Valley Association Realtors here, Southland Regional actually. But when they were pushing this, they were very much for it, and they said that they worked in some revisions, and that there would be these minimum lot sizes. But the numbers you gave are extremely small. They were saying they were larger than that. So that never happened, or?
So the minimum lot size that you can divide it into, each lot has to be at least 1,200 square feet. But if you're using the lot split, you have to split it into equal lots. So, and it has to be at least a 40-60 split. So if you have if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, it has to be 4,000, 6,000.
Right. But if you have a 5,000 square foot lot in Encino Park, which many of them are, you can legally still do this and create 2 2,500 square foot lots and build two units. They have to be detached, or can they be attached, the 2 units?
They can be attached.
Wow.
And most people are gonna, build duplexes if
Yeah.
you're going in for investment.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
There's a question from Ara. Would a single family developed into 4 rental units qualify for a 1031 exchange? I have a good idea what the answer is, but I'll let Sheri take a shot at it.
I honestly, I don't know. So
Okay. So I'll talk about this. So the issue, if you're using SB9 based on the information Sheri just gave us, is that you have to technically live on the property, right, for at least 3 years. Correct? That's part of the conditions, is if my understanding is. And
the lot split one, not for the other.
for the lot split one. Okay.
But you can always just pay the fee because you file a covenant for 3 years. But you can just pay like some sort of a fee at the sale of the property, I think, right? I'm not sure.
So the city has a covenant saying that you're going to use this as your primary residence for 3 years. I don't know what the fee is.
Is that the linkage? I think it's called linkage fee, right? Have you heard about that? Because I had a property that I was supposed to live in for 2 years, and I sold it before 2 years, and 3 years, and I kept it for 2.5 years instead of 3, and all I had to do is just file a covenant, a linkage fee, and it's just a fee they deducted from my escrow, pretty much.
But it sounds like you paid the fee because you sold the property, but you were living there, right?
Well, I was building it, actually. It was considered a primary residence, yes.
Okay.
So, well, going back to the original question about the 1031 exchange, keep in mind the property needs to be an investment property, right, in order to qualify for a 1031 exchange. So unless all the units are being rented as an investment property, the property doesn't qualify as a 1031. It would be interesting, you might be able to claim, so say you ended up building 4 units, you did live on 1, and you had 3 rental units that you were building. I don't know what the IRS says about, claiming a 75% 1031, on a brand new 4 unit. You probably could get away with that, but that is a question for the CPA.
Well, what's kind of confusing for me is, okay, if you have to live on it, but you do split the lot, that means that you can sell the other lot, right? And
right.
Okay. All right. Or you can make that one into investment property. Okay, we'll figure it out.
I'm not sure if there's a question that Stephanie's asking here.
No, I just pasted the linkage fee explanation of what it's for and when it applies. So anybody, just a link to the planning. Yeah.
Sheri, can I ask you a question? Have you done an SB9 or SB10 project yet?
I have not done one yet, but we have a lot of clients that are calling for the information, and we send them, depending on what city they're in, we send them the memo of the process for doing it. But I assume, usually people only call us when they have legal problems. So if this is something that they can just, go to their architect and start processing these plans and do the work, then, they'll call me at the end of the year if there's problems, but I probably wouldn't be involved.
Got it. Very good. Are there any other questions? If not, I think we want to give Sheri a huge round of applause for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you for the information. I have other groups I'm going to be sharing Sheri with for this information as well, because there's so much out there, and this is an evolving situation, as we've seen. So we may have you come back and give us some updates later on, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you guys again so much for coming, and special thanks to Sheri. Hope to see you at some of our future meetings. LA Multifamily Meetup is our meetup group. So if you'd like to officially sign up there and join and follow us. And again, the next, the session I posted in the chat is realestatealliancela.org on April 26th. It's going to be all about creatively increasing inventory. And again, discussing SB 9 and 10, ADUs, tenancy in common projects, and senior housing. So we hope to see you guys very soon. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good
Bye.
to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, bye.
Bye.